In October of 1987, everybody in America and the world became a godparent to one little girl, when what should have been a regular day for little Jessica McClure became the longest 58 hours of her life when she fell down a well.
For the second night, floodlights have lit the backyard.
As the hours went on,
The entire country watched every second as rescuers scrambled to save the little girl's life. I'm your host, Nostalgic Nick, here to revisit that fateful day 35 years ago. We're gonna dive deep into the lives of the key players and find out where everybody's baby Jessica is today.
I don't know if I ever told you this, but when I was a kid, I fell into a well. Happened the same day as baby Jessica, but she got all the press.
If you're claustrophobic, beware. This event cuts things real close. And if you enjoy our deep dive, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe so you're always a part of our history. Meet the McClures. Baby Jessica was born on March 26, 1986, making her all of 18 months old when she fell down the well. Her parents were 18-year-olds, Reba Sissy and Louis Chip McClure, when they gave birth to a baby girl in Midland, Texas, which was known as an oil city. Except as the family was starting off in the mid-80s, Texas hit an oil bust. Basically, there was an overproduction after the energy crisis in the 70s. So when the demand went away, the price of oil plummeted, which is not good for an oil town.
The oil bust has hit everyone, from the big developers who built new office buildings and shopping centers which now stand empty, to the owners of mobile homes now repossessed.
But luckily, it was this oil town that would end up saving this little girl's life. Jessica's aunt, Jamie Moore, ran a daycare center out of her home. So on that fateful day of October 14th, Jessica went over to play outside with 4 other children, supervised by her mom. Back inside, the phone rang, and Sissy went to answer. She was gone just a few minutes when the screaming began. Sissy ran outside and saw every parent's worst nightmare. Her daughter was nowhere to be seen, and when she did discover where Jessica was, the reality wasn't much better. Aunt Jamie's property had a well measuring 8 inches in diameter, which was covered by a large stone to keep any accidents from happening. And still to this date, no one is quite sure how the well opened up, but those 8 inches were just enough for baby Jessica to plummet 22 feet down the shaft. Jessica's mother would say the 3 minutes it took for police to arrive felt like a lifetime, but the wait was just beginning. The rescue part 1, a dead end. The moment Jessica fell, the clock began ticking. She was pinned in the tunnel with one leg trapped above her forehead, and this would have significant consequences. The human body is meant to be upright, head on top, to better aid the heart pumping. So the heart was fighting against gravity. Authorities arrived and rescue workers joined in. Their first plan was to use jackhammers to dig themselves a tunnel of their own. Except the 22 feet fall now had Jessica past the earth that was harder than granite, and the surrounding area was quite rocky too. The rescue part 2, turning the tides. Maybe this accident would never have happened if Jessica wasn't in that backyard in Midland, Texas, but she may have never been rescued if it had happened anywhere else. Remember, Midland is an oil town, which made it the perfect place equipped for digging operations. So rescuers brought in a team of mining experts and an engineer to plan and execute their next move.
We've been on track right from the beginning.
No miscalculations?
No miscalculations.
They decided on what's called a rat hole rig, usually for getting telephone poles dug deep into the earth. With this, they could finally make themselves a tunnel next to Jessica's, but they couldn't drill right against the well shaft or they risked hurting baby Jessica. To cut through the rock, they used water jet cutting, which was a new technology at the time, and the work was intense. Responders pumped oxygen down to the young, cramped girl, and they lowered a microphone so they could talk back and forth. And what they heard was sobering. Little Jessica alternated between crying and humming and singing. A detective at the scene remembered hearing this cycle of emotions. The detective said the team didn't yell down words of encouragement, but instead asked her to keep singing. He'll always remember her quietly singing Winnie the Pooh as the hours ticked by.
Winnie the Pooh, Winnie the Pooh.
This would be the anthem of one of the most remarkable rescues of the age. When the drilling was done, the new tunnel was 30 inches wide and 29 feet deep. They next drilled horizontally to get to the well shaft, and this was not smooth. That specific angle was hard on the equipment, but finally they now needed a hero. Paramedic Robert O'Donnell went down the shaft, yet another decision with grave consequences. O'Donnell carefully got Jessica out from her pinned position using KY jelly and the rubber foot of a tripod stand. That part alone took ages, but finally, 58 hours later, Jessica McClure was brought back to the surface, injured and covered in dirt, but miraculously alive. Barely. Her eyes hardly opened, and the girl wasn't out of the woods quite yet. The process of healing. After her ordeal, Jessica needed 15 surgeries. Her head was covered in galls, and the cut underneath left a lasting scar. But most attention went to her foot, the one stuck above her forehead for practically 3 days. One toe ended up with gangrene after no circulation and was amputated. The rest of her foot needed a lot of reconstructive surgery. But soon, Jessica was seen walking around in a cushioned cast. The young girl then developed chronic rheumatoid arthritis, a condition that usually affects much older individuals. Jessica would carry marks from this infamous event years later. But what about everybody else? The news. This was it. This was the story every media network covered. Everyone was watching. The rescue of Jessica McClure is sometimes called the first event that got 24-hour news coverage. CNN was America's first news outlet to run all day and led coverage of the rescue. And what welcome coverage it was. In fact, while rescue efforts went on, Time magazine basically said, "We've had a lot of bad news lately. It would be great for this to work out." A US tanker was hit with a missile. Nancy Reagan was expected to be hospitalized with cancer, and the stock market was hit hard. As then President Reagan said, quote, "Everybody in America became godmothers and godfathers of Jessica while this was going on." And Jessica earned more than that too, with no small amount of donations, which all went into a trust fund for the toddler. When news broke she was rescued, people celebrated like she was family. People watching at home cried with relief. The young and old prayed together, and parents held their children close.
I know all of you feel the same way we do. This has been one of the longest 58 hours in our lives.
Heroic heartbreak. No one involved in the rescue asked for attention, but it still came, and sometimes with negative effects.
Now we discover that what happened to the hero who rescued baby Jessica is a case study in the high price of fame.
Robert O'Donnell, who famously pulled Jessica from that well, suffered from PTSD, and when that bomb ripped Oklahoma City, Robert watched in quiet horror with his mother and said those rescuers would need a lot of help, not for days, but for years. On top of that, O'Donnell had gone from being hailed a hero to being forgotten. And terribly, just 4 days after the Oklahoma City bombing, Robert O'Donnell, a true hero, took his own life. His brother stated the paramedic had never been quite the same after Jessica's rescue. As for Jessica's parents, you could say they'd just been kids themselves. And all that publicity was just too much. And stories covering their messy divorce drove that point home. Their lives had become fodder for the tabloids. Not so baby Jessica. Those 58 hours in that well would be the most eventful of Jessica's life. Not that she remembered. She didn't know she was America's most sensational, unifying story of the decade. Until one day, the 5-year-old saw an episode of the show Rescue 911. She then asked her stepmother who the girl in the well was. Growing up, kids around her knew who she was, and not always in a good way. She was bullied. One kid called her well dweller for years. Mostly, Jessica kept to herself. At the age of 15, thinking about the event bored her. Yes, she described it as boring, her words, not mine. But life got exciting again in 2004. Jessica graduated from Greenwood High School and stayed around that oil town through all her biggest life events, including getting married to Daniel Morales. The two met through Jessica's work, which was in a weirdly ironic way at a daycare center. Jessica's Facebook profile says she originally worked as an aide to a special education teacher at Midland Elementary.
I actually told a lady the other day at work that I was the little girl that fell in the well, and she was like, oh my gosh, you're baby Jessica.
Now she's proudly listed as a stay-at-home mother with 2 kids of her own, Simon and Cheyenne, born in 2007 and 2009, while Daniel works as a foreman for a pipe supply company. When Jessica turned 25, she received access to that trust fund, which accumulated around $1 million, but unfortunately, the 2008 market crash hurt that significantly. But the new family had enough to buy themselves a decent home around 2 miles from that 22 feet deep well, which today is now properly stoppered with a plaque that reads, "For Jessica, 10/16/87, with love from all of us." Jessica McClure Morales visited that well as an adult, her scar partially visible, her right foot noticeably smaller than her left. She called the experience hard, but not upsetting. She has a what doesn't kill you makes you stronger mentality, and thinks it's a sign God was with her that day. As a mother herself, she uses that ordeal to teach kids to be humble and never take anything for granted.
You can't take life for granted. You really can't, because then at any point in time, it could be gone.
Baby Jessica, as the world knew her, was a first-of-its-kind spectacle and turned everyone into a worried mess for a grueling 58 hours. And after becoming famous at such a young age, Jessica grew into a woman with wisdom beyond her years. So, let's talk memories. Do you recall watching this story unfold? Did you catch the moment paramedics carried her tiny body out of that well? Share all your memories in the comments below. After all, these are the stories that bind us unlike any other, so tell yours. If you enjoyed our deep dive, give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a memory. But from all of us here at Do You Remember, thank you very much for watching.